Now, we've said that alcoholism is a mechanism of escape. Okay, so what is it exactly that people want to escape from? Well, we've done lots of research into this, and we've identified 4 main categories. Obviously, there's derivatives of these. For instance, you know, we talk about one of the categories being psychological pain, in other words, unresolved issues and whatever. You might say subcategories of psychological pain can be anxiety, depression. So it covers a vast amount of, you know, of ground, really. So step 3 is come to accept that the locus of the problem is a mind infected with, now here's what we call the sobriety saboteurs, the objects in our mind that are there, that are destructive. Okay, fear, and an acronym of fear quite often used in the circles of alcoholism is forget everything and run. Actually, there's another derivative of that which begins with F as well, but it's F everything and run. So, you know, and it's quite correct in my belief. So fear, people want to escape their fears. Futility, what does that mean? It means that mine was mainly futility, and it means you want to escape from that feeling that there's no purpose to life, there's no point in life. It's that depressive feeling, really. Guilt is a big one for people, and again, people watching this DVD that are experiencing alcoholism will know all about guilt and remorse. I don't need to say anymore. And pain. When I refer to pain, I'm not referring to, you know, a cut or a broken leg. I'm referring to psychological pain. I'm referring to unresolved issues. Okay. So these are the 4 categories. So we're saying step 3 says, come to accept that the locus of the problem was a mind, or is a mind, infected with fear, futility, guilt and pain, the answer to which is a profound shift in consciousness. A profound shift in thinking. Okay. And don't worry, that might sound a tall order, but the rest of the philosophy is to give you the tools to induce and maintain this shift in thinking. Okay, which as therapists and mentors, we're going to do ourselves as well. We're going to experience this for ourselves. On accepting step 3, on accepting that alcoholism is a mechanism for escaping what we call the sobriety saboteurs, fear, futility, guilt and psychological pain. Once we've accepted that, that's where the root cause of our destructive drinking comes from, automatically our thinking begins to shift. Okay. Though alcohol severely aggravates existing problems and ultimately creates new ones, we cannot alleviate alcoholism by merely abstaining from drink. This is most important. The problem ultimately is not in the bottle. The problem is our polluted and distorted mind. Okay. I'm not condoning drinking, because we've already identified that when a person experiencing alcoholism drinks, they should know they're going to abreact. But putting that problem down doesn't alleviate the chaos in the mind. Okay. And it's the chaos in the mind that's given rise to their destructive drinking. So by saying, okay, I've finished with drink, I'm not doing any work on ourselves, ultimately they're going to pick the drink up again. Because the fears, the guilt, the pain, or the feeling of life's not worth living, there's nothing, no purpose to life, they're going to seek escape from them. At some point in the future, they're going to seek escape. And unfortunately, it normally takes a while before people realise that alcohol, even though they've crossed the abreactive threshold, alcohol, they still have this belief that alcohol somehow will sort the problems out. They're still chasing the effect that alcohol had in the early days, which once they've crossed the abreactive threshold, it never does. Even if they take a small minimal amount of alcohol, they'll abreact. It'll throw the mind into turmoil. It'll make them feel physically sick. So that's not an option anymore. So we're stuck with this fear, this guilt, this pain, this futility. Again, I label them the sobriety saboteurs. So what we need to do, we said before that, you know, by imbibing alcohol, we don't escape our problems anymore. We've crossed the abreactive threshold. To escape our problems, the only way to escape our problems is to solve them. The content of our polluted mind is the fundamental problem. Okay. What we're saying here, the real problem is not in the bottle. It's in the mind. So far we have identified that alcoholism isn't an illness or disease. It isn't predetermined by genetic inheritance. It isn't predetermined by learned behaviour. It isn't the result of an addictive personality. We have actually identified that alcoholism, due to its effects on the frontal lobe and on memory, on the frontal lobes and memory, it's a mechanism of escape. Okay. Right. So what we really want to do, when people say I want to get out of my mind, that is, it's very, very practical. Why do they want to get out of the mind? They want to get out of the mind, that's because that's where all the problems lay. But the problem we've hit and we've identified now is alcoholism doesn't work anymore. When we imbibe alcohol, we don't get out of our mind anymore. In fact, we become imprisoned in our mind. That's the difference between pre-abreactive threshold and post-abreactive threshold drinking, is that before we crossed that invisible line, we did get out of our mind. We forgot our problems for a while. We didn't care about our problems for a while. But once we're post-abreactive threshold and once we've crossed that invisible line, alcohol doesn't provide an escape route anymore. In fact, it makes things a damn sight worse. And we need to really absorb that statement. We need to be aware of that. And ultimately, what step 3 is asking us to do is accept all of these things. It's to accept, you know, the concept that alcoholism isn't an illness, a disease, and so on. Learned behaviour and all them things. It's asking us to realise that the reason we seek escape is that we've got unresolved problems in our mind. And it's from these problems that reside in the mind, that we seek escape. And it's also asking us, you know, the first 3 steps are asking us to realise that alcohol isn't going to work anymore. So we have to set about resolving the problems in our mind. So it says here, are we condemned to a life of misery, or is there an alternative escape route? Okay, again, we've said this many times this morning. The only way to escape our problems really is to solve them. Okay, so how do we identify our problems? What exactly are we seeking escape from? Okay, here I mentioned it before. The 4 main categories that we identified, and there's many subcategories of these, were fear, futility, pain in the psychological sense of pain, and guilt. These are the sobriety saboteurs, and part of living life consciously, which is step 5, is identifying when the sobriety saboteurs are active in our mind. And we're going to do lots of work on them. You see, what I'm giving you at the moment and during this stage of the course is a general synopsis of the philosophy. So the true nature of addiction we're going to look at here. And what is addiction? You know, people talk about addiction, and often people, they feel it's a force that's happening to them, that they have no control over them. I used to feel, the only way I can describe addiction for me is I felt I was possessed by a negative force. I'm not talking about supernatural ghosts, or I'm talking that there was a real destructive force active in my psyche, in my mind, and I felt like I had no control over it. Okay, but when we look at addiction, and we look at the true nature of addiction, actually addiction is something we've taught ourselves to do. Let's look at it. We had problems from which we couldn't bear. Okay, through experimenting with drink, we found out that when we drank, our problems paled into insignificance for a little while because of the effects of alcohol on us. So that we've learned, problem, take a drink. Okay, then what happens, we have to drink more and more and more and more to get the same effect. When this happens, we go into alcoholic blackouts, alcoholic amnesia, and we act in ways that are not conducive to our personality, to our character. We act in odd ways, and when we come out of these blackouts, we feel really guilty. And then we want another drink. We've learned that anytime we feel psychological pain, drink takes it away, pre-abreactive threshold. So we drink again. So we've taught ourselves. So what we're saying here, let's have a look at addiction. Addiction is not something that has been unwittingly thrust upon us. It's not something that's happening to us. That's disempowerment. That is relinquishing control on our behalf. It is not something that, it's not a process by which we've been enslaved. We've not just been unlucky and somebody, you know, we've ended up with this. I'll tell you what it is in a minute, but it's not an illness. It's not a state of powerlessness. Addiction is simply a habit. It's something we've taught ourselves to do. We've seen that. You know, again, I reiterate, problem, drink, problem relieved for a while. And problem comes back when the drink, effects of drink wear off, have another drink. We've taught ourselves this process. And what happens is that when we repeat a process over and over and over again, it becomes second nature. It becomes unconscious. So then we have a problem. Before we know it, a drink is in our hand. When a process becomes unconscious, it feels like we're not in control. It feels like there's a force acting upon us. When in reality, we've just taught ourselves to carry out this behaviour so many times, it's automated. And that's called habituated. And the nature of addiction is a habit. So therefore, addiction is a habit that we've taught ourselves to do so well that it's second nature. This is the powerful side of addiction, because we've done it that many times. You know, when you get into your car now, you don't think about driving, really. Your mind might wander off into other things, but you do it automated. You don't have to think about it. That's the same with a person experiencing alcoholism. When they have a problem, they don't think about it. It's happened, the drink's in the hand. And they'll even say to you afterwards, I don't even remember picking that drink up. And then they attribute it to the, you know, oh, that's my illness. You know, that's me genetic inheritance. No, it's not. It's something that you've learned yourself to do. And bear in mind, as a species, we will avoid displeasure at all costs. So there's a logical reason for you taking that drink. For the people experiencing alcoholism, to take that drink, they wanted to rid themselves of displeasure and find the fastest route to pleasure, or from discomfort to comfort. And they found that alcohol was just the thing at the beginning. But that is the seductive ploy of alcoholism. It drags people in because it works so well initially. You know, for a while it works well, until we have to take more and more alcohol. And then what we're doing, we're developing, we're feeding an addiction, we're becoming experts in this method of escapism. But we've taught ourselves to do it by experience. And by, you know, by default, anything that we've taught ourselves to do, we can teach ourselves not to do. So let's look at addiction in a different light. We've become, let's say we've experienced addiction because we've taught ourselves to carry out a process of escape so well that we've become experts in it. We've become that good expert in it, it's now second nature. You know, for a person experiencing alcoholism to pick up a drink when they have a problem is as natural to them as the air you breathe. So again, we need to become very aware of what's going on, and that's what step 3 is all about. It's about realising that we have taught ourselves this addiction, and we just want to alleviate the discomfort and find comfort. But when we cross the abreactive threshold, we just lead ourselves, if we drink, we lead ourselves into deeper discomfort, deeper displeasure. In fact, we lead ourselves into hell, as people watching this DVD will know. It's a horrible place to be. So, the other thing is, it's commonly said, are we powerless over alcoholism? Of course we're not powerless over alcoholism. You know, the reason we feel powerless is, like I said before, that the negative psychological strategies that drive alcoholism operate at an unconscious level. So these things that we've done repeatedly, have a problem, take a drink, forget, don't care. We've done it that many times. We've habituated them. They become habit. That is the nature of addiction. And that means that every time we hit a problem, we reach for the bottom automatically. That sums up addiction. So, we're not powerless over it. Once we become aware of the mechanisms that are driving our alcoholism, we can do a lot about it. Let's not use the word, which is bandied about quite often, that we're powerless. We're not powerless over alcoholism whatsoever. Anything appertaining to ourselves, we have full power. We don't have power over other people, but anything appertaining to ourselves, we have full control over. And we need to make no mistake about that. Okay. So the absence of conscious control when you drink, and I explained this before, this is why I realise now that I felt like I was possessed by something, because the mechanisms driving my alcoholism, the drivers for alcoholism, operate at an unconscious level. It feels like you're not doing it yourself. It feels like something is impacting on you. Don't let that's a scam, you know, that's wrong, let's see through, you know, let's see through that, guys, and realise, yes, we do. We have every control. We have complete control over anything to do with ourselves. Okay, that brings us really to the end of what we've done in step 1. We've admitted that we've got an alcohol habit, okay, and that the reason that we've developed this destructive habit is that we're trying to escape unresolved issues, the vicissitudes of life. Basically, we're trying to escape any problems. Let's keep it simple, okay. We realise that alcohol initially does work. We also realise that as a species, we're a pleasure-seeking species. We'll take the path of least resistance from displeasure to pleasure. When alcohol seemingly masks our problems instantaneously by affecting the frontal lobes of our brain and our memory, we think, great, we've got the magical panacea for all of our problems. But this is a guise. This is wrong. It's a ploy. It's a seductive ploy on behalf of alcohol to draw us in, because we need more and more and more alcohol to achieve the same effects. And when we get to the quantities of alcohol that it takes, eventually what happens is that we go straight into blackout and we act uncharacteristically. We do all sorts of things that we... Bear in mind, we're like a loose cannon. All our morals and all like the rules that we abide by, not only does alcohol, when it hits the front lobes, uninhibit us in ways that we don't care about our problems, we don't care about rules, regulations or anything else when we imbibe alcohol. So we might break the law, we might insult people, we don't care, we don't abide by the rules of life because that's the way alcohol impacts on us. So then we create a new history from which we seek escape. Because when we sober up we think, oh no, you know, what did I do last night, where was I, who did I insult, whatever. Can't bear this. I know, take a drink, that'll get rid of it all. But when we cross the abreactive threshold, it makes them problems worse. So then what we need to realise is that, well, all right, if alcoholism isn't disease and, you know, etc., what is it exactly that we're trying to escape from? And the four main categories are fear, futility, psychological pain and guilt. Okay, we will elaborate on that. So the first three steps basically are acceptance. It's to educate people, and then once they accept and say, yes, I agree with that, then they can move